Good morning, Eleni. This is Liz.
Good
Hey,
morning,
Matt.
Lynn.
Hi.
Morning.
Good morning.
This is Matt.
I
Good
see
morning.
Kate. Eleni, do you have a few minutes after the call? I want to pick your mind about OWeb travel.
Yeah, let's chat.
Okay. I'm hitting a roadblock here, and I don't know if it truly is a roadblock with them or not, but I'm like, oh. So, and it because I had your email from last time and it was really helpful to me. But okay, great. I'll
Sounds
call you
good.
at on one of your numbers. I don't know which one.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Sounds good.
Kate, I was on the Monday fire call. That was real informative. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I think we're doing those every Monday right now. So
Okay. It's nice to have them.
awesome. Morning, Brenda.
Hey, Brenda.
Eleni, can you hear me through my headset? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Jim's trying to get in the Teams meeting, Eleni.
I'm sending him a message.
At least we know he has coverage somewhere in the world today.
Eleni, you can hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Hi, Alexi. Are you surviving the heat in Medford?
Morning. Yeah, it's been brutal.
It has been.
The AC has just been on 24/7, so I'm very grateful for AC.
Okay. All right. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Yeah, can't complain.
Great.
Yeah. How are you doing?
Doing good. I'm actually out of town. I'll be back in Medford tonight, and I heard there's a heat advisory through this evening.
Yep, I think it's supposed to be, I don't know, 100 maybe today.
Oh,
Yeah, 98.
98. Okay. Hopefully it'll break at some
Okay.
point.
At some point.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hey,
Yeah,
he's here.
I was sitting there on a Teams link. Reminded me that I guess we had two links and she had set it up for Zoom. So thank you, Eleni. I was wondering what was going on, about ready to reach out to you. Who else do we have here? Got Matt, Kate, Brenda, Heath, Jeff. Looks like Chandra. All right. In that case, I'm going to get us started. So, good morning and welcome to the July 16th, 2025 special meeting for the Board of Forestry. For the record, I'm Jim Kelly, Chair of the State Board of Forestry. The purpose of today's meeting will be for the board to connect with the Natural Resources Policy Advisors from the governors on the topic of the state forester recruitment process. Additionally, the board will discuss updates to board authority related to oversight of the state forester, the potential changes to the board policies manual. Today's meeting will be live streamed on YouTube. To make sure our viewers online can follow along with the meeting, I'll offer some best practices. Please remain on mute unless you are speaking. When speaking, state your name for the meeting record. Should you need to step away, please mute and disable your video. If anyone experiences technical issues during the meeting, use the chat function on Zoom to speak up, and our ODF hosts will do their best to find a solution. So with that, I will perform a roll call. Liz Hogkawa?
Here.
Okay. Heath Curtis?
I'm here.
All right. Ben Dormling cannot join us today. Joe Justice? Yeah, I didn't see Joe. Okay. Joe is not here. Alexi Vecchio
Here.
and Brenda McComb.
Here.
All right. With everyone here, I will now allow our partners at the governor's office to introduce themselves and begin their presentation. Huntington, Chandra Ferrari.
Good morning. I'll go first. I'm Jeff Huntington, Senior Policy Advisor to Governor Kotek on natural resource issues. And I'm joined today by...
Hi, good morning, England. For the record, my name is Chandra Ferrari. I'm a Natural Resources Policy Advisor with the Governor's Office, and it's nice to see you all.
Great. So our main goal here with this part, and I know you guys are limited on time, is to discuss this the plan that you have for the state forestry recruitment and for the involvement of Board of Forestry members. And from there, with that said, I'll leave it to you guys.
Okay. Chandra and I talked, and I think I'm going to go first. And we have one slide that we'd like to make sure Chandra can post. And Chandra, while you're doing that, I will say that the RFP for a recruitment firm has been finished. I met with the recruitment firm that responded, worked with the department, and they should be under contract. If they aren't already, they should be within hours or a day. But I'm assuming that they were put under contract in the last 24 hours or so. And Kate might know more about that. And we've been working with DAS, and I believe that the position announcement, will be out on the street. If it's not this morning, it will be this afternoon. So the posting of the position will be live today with the dates and all of it's based on the work that you all did. We went through it in our office and did some proofing around additional language related to wildfire responsibilities. But otherwise, I don't think we did there were no substantive changes. I thought what you all did was great work. So thank you for the time and the energy you put into the announcement language and the description of the position. So I think that the recruitment process, we can say, is officially underway. As you know, Senate Bill 1051 passed and was signed, and it had an emergency clause in it, so it was effective on signature. So we are in that framework now. What Chandra's put on the screen is a recruitment plan process that we have built out based on the time that would lead toward a Senate confirmation at the November legislative days. So the Senate is meeting to consider nominations from the governor both in September and November 17th and 18th. So we're targeting the November timeline. This process is roughly built on something that we have used for about six recruitments for six recruitments for natural resource directors over the last 2.75 years. So what we've put out here is something that we've refined and learned and refined some more on a few different agencies. Some have been board and commission recruitments, some have been governor's office recruitments, but the process has been somewhat similar. And it's not too far off, I don't think, from some of the conversations you may have had in a recruitment plan as the board was working through it. For our office, Chandra is going to take point on the recruitment on behalf of the governor. I'm going to join just because I have the experience of having done a few of these, but we're going to bring and we anticipate, and you'll see here in a minute, that we want to bring board members in at various stages in that recruitment. And we view this as a partnership between the governor's office and the Board of Forestry to make sure we get the absolute best hire that we can possibly have for the state forester position. So I'm going to go through this just briefly, and then make sure, Chandra, you pitch in here as you wish, and then we'll talk about whatever you all would like to talk about. So the process does start out working with the recruiter spending the open recruitment period doing outreach. I would say that if you have suggestions of individuals, any board members, if you have suggestions of individuals that there should be direct outreach to by the recruiter, please go to Chandra with your suggestion and contact information. She will make sure that gets to the recruitment firm, and they will be doing, and we have every expectation that they are going to be beating the bushes for really great candidates as a national search. But with the position description, the minimum qualifications that are in the announcement, with clarity that all the candidates as a minimum qualification have to have experience with Western forest management issues and wildfire. So if you have suggestions, please don't sit on them. Let Chandra know. She will work directly with the recruiting firm to make sure that any individual you identify is contacted by the recruitment firm. We won't be, and I would ask that you not be engaged directly with with folks that are being recruited. If somebody reaches out to you, send them on to Chandra, and she'll make sure that they get forwarded on for more contact by the recruitment firm. We found that works really well to have that point of contact be there, and they can have pretty direct conversations about the scope of the position and all. We will move to processing and screening the applications the week of September 1st. So the position will be open through the end of August. And assuming that it doesn't need to be, the recruitment time doesn't need to be extended, we'll start screening the applications the week of September 1st. That process is set up as more of an objective screening. It's based on the attributes that have been identified and the position announcement and position description. We'll work with two board members, the board chair and Chandra and I. That is essentially the criteria are set up for giving point allocations to applications. So it's not a subjective screening, it's more of a point allocation process so that we have a ranked point score for the different applicants. And then that group individually scores. We combine scores, aggregate them, and that gives us a sense of the rankings of applicants. And then there's no predetermined cutoff. This group would take the first cut at how many applicants do we want to move forward in the first tranche of interview process. And that frequently is somewhere between 6 and 8. It's been less and it's been more. But that's that first process of screening the applications in more of an objective scoring regime, and Department of Administrative Services HR will be overseeing that with us and make sure that we do that according to the criteria that they have set for that stage of the process. Then we move into stakeholder interviews and the interview process. And we have set up 3 rounds at this point. Our expectation is to have 3 rounds. The first round is with stakeholder panels, and we'll establish 2 panels of stakeholders that will do interviews as a group. In other processes, it's worked really well to have those 2 stakeholder panels do back-to-back interviews with the candidates on the same day. So a candidate moves for the first panel and then goes right into an interview with the second panel. We distinguish those 2 stakeholder panels as distinct groups of interest in the position and in relationship to the agency. So you could imagine on this particular interview process, it might be a more timber production oriented landowner panel and a different panel that's more conservation kind of oriented. But that's still open to be framed up. At the end of those the stakeholder panel discussions, our normal practice is to have a debriefing where we join the interview process at the end, and the panelists talk as a group, a facilitated discussion led by the recruiter to give us feedback on what they saw and what they heard, and to talk to us about preferences. We collect all that information as part of that round of interviews, and sometimes there's a winnowing of the field based on that, sometimes not. We hold open that option. And then we move to the second round, which would include board members, represented staff from the agency, and other agency representatives at an executive team level. So on that round 2, we frequently have folks that are the tribal coordinator for a different agency, the HR lead for a different agency in the state or DAS, somebody with specialty in DEI issues that agencies have to deal with. So it's a very management administrative kind of oriented panel. That's round 2. And again, most often that results in another winnowing down till we get to, hopefully at that point, we have 3 or 4 exceptionally well qualified candidates. Sometimes it's been 2. It's never been more than 4 after the first 2 rounds. And then we frame based on what we are seeing a third round of interviews that has members of the governor's executive team and the board chair to do a final set of interviews before the governor meets the candidates that are the finalists. So you can see that we're talking about round 1 being the week of September 15th, round 2 the week of the 22nd, round 3 the week of the 29th. So we really have it moving right through week to week to week. And then the governor completing her interviews in the week of October 6th. So that we can be in a good spot by the 13th of October. Generally speaking, that gives us a little bit of slack in there. There's another week that's available to us at some point if things begin to slide. But our target here is to walk the nomination across the street from the governor's office to the Senate on October 17th, 1 month ahead of the legislative days. So, Chandra, I don't know if you want to fill in. I'm sure I missed a couple of things. You want to fill in around the edges for me?
Yeah, I actually do not believe that there's anything that I have to add at the moment.
Okay. Well, let's just open the floor. I mean, you all wanted to talk to us about it. We wanted to put just a general architecture up in front of you, and let's just talk about it, please. And this is nothing here is final. We should have marked a big watermark of draft across the screen. every recruitment's a little different, and this is the time to put your fingerprints on things.
Okay, I wanted to mention first that Joe Justice joined us seconds after the completion of the roll call. And so we're glad to have Joe here. I just want to be sure that as you were requesting that any of us can make suggestions for people for this recruitment, that doesn't have to come from the board. Any of us
Individuals, yes.
can do that. Want to have clarity there. So with that, other comments, questions?
Chair Kelly, this is Liz Ekpow. I have a clarifying question for either Jeff or Chandra. So what I picked up, Jeff, is that the intent is that we do that in partnership with the board, the recruitment process. And so I just want to be certain that where I pick up in your explanation that we're going to be able to participate and we're welcome to participate is in any kind of suggestions for recruitment that we'll send through Chandra. Um, we'll have an opportunity, or two board members will have an opportunity for the screening of the applications, one being the chair. And then it sounds like there is another opportunity for the board members during the second round. And does that define the sort of the realm of how we'll participate?
So on the screening piece, we're comfortable having the chair plus two board members involved.
Oh, plus
So
two,
three of
okay.
you involved in the screening. In the second round, there's an opportunity for a couple more board members to be engaged, and then in the final round, the chair is back in for continuity. At least that's what we've done in the past. We've kept a close connection with the chair of the commission at the beginning and the end, with a plug-in of a couple of other members in the middle, so that it spreads it around a little bit. But we think it's important. I think it's important, based on experience, to have the chair not only at the beginning when we're screening, but talking to the chief of staff for the governor in that final round about reflections that the chair has seen and may have gathered input from individual board members.
Okay, and so this might be a question that'll include my second one. I have three questions, sorry. That may include Matt. If from those board members that participate in those distinct phrases, Matt, can they come back and share that information with the entire board, or is that sort of not allowed?
Chair Kelly, board members, since this is a decision of the governor's office, the public meetings law is going to be under a very different analysis.
Mhm.
That there wouldn't be a public meeting for any of the board members to deliberate on appointment of the forester, since it is the governor's decision.
Okay.
So yeah, some of those serial communication issues just wouldn't arise under this process.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And then my last question is just a general one. Under some of the criteria that we're looking for a candidate, we're saying Western experience, and I just want to clarify, it's probably not just Oregon, and it's probably not just Pacific Northwest. When we talk about Western, we're probably talking about anywhere from the Intermountain, Colorado, Wyoming, California, that can be considered or could be deemed qualified for that for recruitment.
That is my interpretation of Senate Bill 1051.
Okay,
When we put the language in, it was Western experience in Western forest management. And
okay.
it was no more specific than that.
All right, thanks much. That's all I have. Thank y'all.
Chair Kelly, could I follow up just to make sure I understood Matt DeVore's answer?
Yes, of course.
I wanted to be sure. Was it embedded in your answer, Matt, that it would be fine for the board members that are participating in the screening and in round two and the chair to talk with any of the other board members about what they saw in their observations, and for that just for impressions to come back to the governor's office through the vehicle of those board members or the chair?
Chair Kelly and Mr. Huntington, yeah, yes, I think that's essentially right. That since this is an appointment that the governor is making, it's not on the board's agenda to make the appointment or part of the board's responsibility. So if board members were to gather in a quorum to provide input to the governor, it would not be a public meeting. Certainly can get into a gray area if the board members start talking about other topics that are within the jurisdiction of the board. But if the conversations focus on advice or recommendations about the forester position, it would not be a public meeting.
So
Does
we
that
would
answer?
hope, Chair Kelly, that you could have kind of some robust conversations with board members throughout the process on observations, since you're at the beginning and at the end. And one thing I didn't say is when the governor does her interviews, we do a consolidated briefing of what we have seen at the different rounds of the interview process, and include that for, as a point of information and context for her. So that's Matt's answer is what I was hoping he'd say. We'd
Yeah,
we'd
and
love that.
in listening to Matt, it also tells me, correct me if I'm wrong, that that doesn't all have to be done through public meetings, and that since I wouldn't have to worry about serial communication, I can be doing as many individual conversations with different board members, gathering their input. Correct?
Chair Kelly, yes, I believe that's correct, as long as the consult or the coordination and the deliberations are meant to give the governor either, through intermediaries or directly. If it's giving the governor recommendations about the forester, then it wouldn't be a public meeting and you wouldn't have to go through the notice or
Okay,
like, yeah, public process.
gotcha. Good. Okay, other board member questions, comments?
Chair Kelly, I've got a comment.
Go ahead, Heath.
Um, First of all, Jeff and Chandra, thank you for your demeanor and approach to this process. The bill gives the governor the authority to make this decision, and that you would continue to reach out to us and involve the Board of Forestry is appreciated and welcome. And I promise we will engage you in good faith and robustly. One thing I wanted to offer in this process is that, as I watched that bill work through the legislature, I was a little squinty-eyed about it. There's some policy trade-offs about, the selection of the state forester. And one thing that made me feel somewhat more comfortable about the bill, not that I'm a legislator or a decision maker, but as one voice in, a robust conversation, is the very specific language in the bill about the qualifications. And we touched on that earlier, but I did want to just repeat some of that. The state forester, must have organizational management experience. So that's one, and either of one of two things, either executive experience and expertise or operational experience and expertise overseeing forest and wildfire management on Western forest lands. That is to say, this is a person with experience and expertise overseeing forest and wildfire management on Western forest lands, either in an executive or operational capacity. And that's pretty specific. I only mean to emphasize that here, and that I hope that this process honors that instruction from the legislature.
One thing that we did do with the announcement was to make sure that the 1054 or 1051 language was embedded in the announcement, where it had not been developed when that announcement was originally drafted. So
Yeah, that's good.
Not
But,
that applicants always follow that kind of stuff.
well, I think you probably better here in part because it goes through Senate confirmation. And if the selected individual doesn't meet those statutory requirements, I think you can expect robust input on that failure. But nevertheless, again, thanks, Jeff and Chandra. I genuinely appreciate this time and the opportunity to speak with you now and in the future.
Yeah. Heath, I do think that's an example of the kind of thing that would be part of the very first round of screening, is we're looking to see, and DAS does it with, first the recruiter tees it up. DAS looks to see if minimum qualifications are met. And then we do a screening on some objective criteria, and one would be rank it 1 through 5. Is this individual showing, excelling in that description? Is it average? Is it below, below expectation? That's the kind of question we would be asking in the initial screening process, right off the bat.
Excellent.
Okay, other board member questions, comments on the recruitment process?
Yeah, Jim, I have my hand up. I'll
Oh,
lower it. So I have a broader question that goes beyond just the recruitment to more of the function of the board going forward after the state forester has been hired. Do we want to go there now, or do you want to wait until we're done with this recruitment process?
I was trying to finish this discussion and then we would move to that discussion
Okay.
and unless anyone has any further questions on recruitment or comments, we'll move there and go
Hey,
ahead.
thanks, Chair Lizak Power. I just had a thought as you were going through the stages and we're trying to filter through these candidates, Jeff and Chandra, is that I hope that, because this is sort of the first time process for the state forester, that we talked about, trying to get 6 to 8, and then we talked about 2 to 4. And what I'm hoping is that we don't let the number drive us, that if we have candidates, we have if we're lucky to have some well-qualified candidates, that is maybe then for that we put them in that group. Because I think that would be a wonderful problem to have, for a selection of state forester, and not let a certain number, for the last group that's maybe doing the management focused stuff, be worried too much about a low number. And I would just not worried that too much about that if we get really great qualified candidates.
It's a wonderful problem to have. We've had it a couple
Yes.
of times in past directors recruitments, and we've kept it much broader, much later in the process. I think it is the governor's preference not to have more than 3 when she's finally talking about an agency director. And she does not like it when somebody comes to her with just one, whether it's a commission appointment or much less a director's appointment. So um, that's where it gets hard toward the end, right?
Of course. Okay, so our next on our agenda is just a discussion about how all of this affects our authorities and our role. And Jeff and Chandra, we've only used up about a half hour of your time, and you're welcome to leave us if you want, or stay on. So I'll let you make your choice there at this point. Good.
Jim, I actually have a question for Chandra and Jeff, so hopefully they don't leave.
Okay, great.
You're-
If you do, then let's move on. So, as I said, the agenda item here is really just to talk about how this changes everything for us in terms of our role and authorities. And so we'll start with you, Brenda, with your question.
Yeah, I think before we can have a meaningful conversation around that, since we now have responsibility without authority to either appoint the state forester nor to oversee and hold accountable the state forester, I would like to hear from Chandra and Jeff what they see as our role is from this point on.
Want me to,
Sure.
Jeff?
I think it'd be great.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that question, Brenda. So the board still, in my opinion, has a very important role. Not only do you have statutory obligations for various functions and tasks, which are really critical, and some of them ongoing right now, rulemakings, et cetera. I still think you're a very important interface point with the forester and with this agency. And in terms of providing some clarity around how well the department is functioning toward achieving the outcomes that we're all still going to collectively share for the department and for forest management in Oregon. I think that our expectation would be that you would be interfacing with our office and with the public around whether or not those expectations are still being met or not. And so while you will not have the direct function of doing assessments of the foresters' job responsibilities and doing the hiring and firing, you have an important role in assessing how well they are undertaking their jobs and how well the outcomes for, again, the agency and forest management in Oregon are being met. And I will note that we have new processes in place right now for our executives where they do 360 reviews on a regular basis, which includes some really robust, I'd say, outreach to not only stakeholders and folks within the agencies, but to boards and commissions as well. And so I still think there is a lot of mechanism or various mechanisms in place where you will have opportunities for conveying your feedback on the effectiveness of the forester in fulfilling their roles.
Yeah, thanks, Chandra. So if that's the case, then we are one voice of many in terms of providing feedback. And if the board agrees among themselves that there's a problem between with the state forester following through on a policy or decision that the board has made, and then it goes to your office, then that could be overruled easily. And you're not likely to be in that position forever, and neither is Jeff. And so we then have to trust that your office will listen to what we have to say. And right now, after the passage of this Senate bill, I have very little reason to trust your office. So I'd like to know more specifically what authority we might be granted going forward.
I'm going to take a turn, and then Shonda, you can answer the direct question. I may not answer your direct question here, Brenda, because I want to add a little bit to what Chandra said. I think that this board is in the same position in terms of directing and working with the agency on forest policy that the Water Resources Commission is in, working with the Department of Water Resources Director on water policy going forward. You have statutory responsibilities and discretion to exercise to direct the department and set expectations on driving policy and completion of policy initiatives that either require rulemaking or set the deck for future rulemakings and direction that has great influence on the department. And I watch that across the board with agencies and commissions, whether they have hiring, firing authority or they don't. It's indistinguishable from where we're sitting. And frankly, I think the Water Resource Department is a great example. That commission instituted an expectation of rulemaking to change the way the state allocates groundwater as a discretionary function and matter of policy, not at the direction of the legislature and not the direction of the governor's office, and initiated what was, Chandra, a 2-year process, I think, that was substantial in the implications for how we manage groundwater in the state. And it was done at the initiation of a commission that cared about the issue, discussed it in open meetings, and voted to ask the department to move forward with that rulemaking. And that's a great example of how a board that has policy oversight and exercises their policy oversight in conjunction with their regulatory, their statutory responsibilities and authorizations can work with the director and do work with the director and set the expectations. I mean, I think you have that bully pulpit in addition to your statutory functions to set forest policy for this state. And
so we're given
that
responsibility.
Has not changed.
Responsibility without authority, then. That's what you're saying.
No,
Yeah,
you
no,
have
it
lots
is.
of authority. Lots of authority. And I want you to exercise it. And I think that other boards and commissions have been doing that as a matter of course. So from our perspective, 1051 does not change the policy responsibilities or discretion of the Board of Forestry in any way. What it does do is it is very clear that human resources, performance evaluation, and the hiring process is now sitting where it frankly has the governor is responsible for the enterprise. It always has been. It's just been exercised in different vehicles. And we don't need to relitigate that. But what we do want is to have this board be as free and as appropriate as you feel collectively to move a policy agenda on forest policy and management of forests in Oregon, as you always have.
I would just comment. I would just comment, effective leadership, in my view, is always a mix of hard power and soft power. And, using the bully pulpit, et cetera, despite what we're seeing at the federal level, typically just, the only way I get my way is by intimidating you and firing you if necessary is rarely a very effective form of leadership. So, I get what you're saying, but let me ask an impolite question of you and Chandra, which is you guys have a lot, always have a lot going on. Why and how can we trust you guys to be plugged in enough to be uh, uh, really doing a good job in terms of managing the hiring, firing, and direction of the state forester?
Geez, Jim, not gonna give us any softballs, huh?
No, sorry.
Okay, well,
You asked for this, guys.
it's true. Thanks.
Yeah.
No, so, I had a conversation, also, with various board members around the need for us to have some regular collaboration and coordination opportunities going forward. And so 2 points. The first is, and Jeff can speak to this a little bit more, that we do put some intensive effort into our agencies that are getting new executives that are being onboarded. And so there is going to be a lot of prioritization of our attention on this agency and on the onboarding process for the new state forester in the short term. And over the long term, I understand that you all will need to be updating I forget what you call it now, if it's the governance manual, if the practices document, right, to incorporate kind of this new process into it. And as part of that, I would appreciate the opportunity to join you or to collaborate with you on what best practices or expectations we might be able to set to establish some continuity and coordination between myself and the board.
Chandra is always looking forward and she's absolutely right. And we don't, from the governor's office perspective, view the line of responsibility for the performance of the state forester as being different today than we did last December. That the governor's responsible for the administration of the enterprise and the performance of directors. And there's a different mechanism with some agencies for accountability and exacting accountability for performance and the management of an agency. But the ultimate responsibility for the enterprise sits with the governor, working in partnership with our boards and commissions, whether they have hiring and firing authority or they don't, to make sure that an agency director and an agency are performing their responsibilities in a transparent and an effective and in an accountable way. So we don't view it as being any different today than it was last year. We just have a different mechanism for executing the hiring and the decision-making around HR issues than we did last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I know Liz has her hand up, and I'll just note that, I think a useful mechanism for us to get more into the granular level of how things are going is when you are establishing board work plans, when we do have a work plan for the state forester that is looking out over the biennium for what our expectations are collectively are. That is a useful check-in mechanism for our office and for the board to stay kind of coordinated on what are the big things in front of us and what are we expecting to see over this duration, and are we or are we not? And so I think there's some grounding exercises that will help us all be on the same page.
Liz?
So I have maybe a question that's like Jim, maybe uncomfortable and a little bit broader like Brenda's. And when I came on the board 4 years ago, state forester was being removed. And then in my 4th year, a second state forester was being removed. And I noted this, and I've talked to a couple people that it just seems, in my experience with state foresters, they have some longevity, like the Chair Powell kind of situation, that they stay there between administrations. So we have these criteria. And one of the things that I would note is that even if you get someone like this that feels all those things, they are in a very fraught environment because unlike Jeff, like the water or even U.S. Fish, the Fish and Wildlife Service, one of the things that this position goes into is, uncontrollable, chaotic, catastrophic conditions that are really highly political, such as the wildfires of the East Side, the coastal fires of 2020, floods that can easily take out, someone in that position. And we've seen that. So what I guess I'm worried about is that when we had 1051, we sort of moved more into the political spectrum with this position, which I think we've tried to keep at a very professional position. How do we, because catastrophic events are being more frequent, more catastrophic in many ways, have you thought about how this selection changes the ability to sort of shelter a state forester for things that they don't have control of? That is a bad financial system for wildfires and such. Because even if we put a person in this position that is a really strong candidate, they're in a system that's highly, I think, more politicized now, for better or worse. Have you guys thought about that? Because I would like to kind of get on a path where we can keep a professional state forester in this seat, much like most of the Western, governors have done. So you may not be able to answer that now, but I just want to put that out there because we owe that to that person who we
Yeah.
select to provide some coverage like we see in other states. So maybe more of a comment.
Yeah, well, and fair and appreciate it. I've had this conversation with a few folks over the last several months in the context of the bill. I tend to have a different perspective. Not saying I'm right, but my perspective at least is that based on experience, we have directors that face uncontrollable financial situations. Look at ODOT right now. And you can look back in history at Fish and Wildlife directors and others that become highly politicized, that when there is transparency and accountability and an openness to working on that issue and through that issue, it is the capacity of the enterprise to say this, this is not an individual's fault that we had a catastrophic wildfire season without a financial mechanism to account for it. It might be well within a director's responsibility to make sure that there's transparency about the financing and the accountability and on in the way the execution is conducted. But it is not a political thing if there is a high level of performance in managing an agency that's struggling with unanticipated or uncontrollable events. And so I see that, and I don't think that an appointment by the governor politicizes that conversation any more than it is already politicized. And in some ways, that single point of accountability actually provides more assurance of continuity than when it's not there. I also will say over my 39 years, I have watched agencies go through a cycle where there's been high turnover in a director's position, and Fish and Wildlife is a great example. In the late 90s and early 2000s, I think that 3 years was the longest that a Fish and Wildlife director made it in any of the Northwestern states. And we cycled. And then we had a Fish and Wildlife director that came on and stayed, Chandra, of what, 15 years, 12 years? Yeah. And it was in part by the way that person managed the agency, but it was also in part the response of the systems to understand that we got culturalized, that's a word, and I don't know that it is. We created a culture of understanding that the challenges the agency were facing were not the fault of the director. They were the circumstances. For Fish and Wildlife, it was wolves and depredation, cattle depredation, and other issues. And water had some similar time periods, not as significant. I feel like there's a greater understanding today of the challenges of forest management and catastrophic wildfire that are different than they were even 4 years ago, much less 8 years ago. And species management, having become embedded in the culture of our expectations of what the controversy is going to be, versus the fact that we're having a controversy is a problem. I don't know. That's a long-winded train of thought, but it's kind of our perspective on it. And I do think that our office believes that having the governor be responsible for the state forester being hired and responsible for the duration of that tenure is part of settling things out in a way that is the case with a couple of other boards and commissions and directors and agencies. And there's a lot of room for disagreement about what I said. I get it.
Yeah, no work.
Just a
Thank you.
perspective.
Thank you for being so forthcoming. I appreciate it.
Hey, I just wanted to mention I'm having some troubles seeing hands up. I do see now that Brenda has her hand up, but if you put your hand up and I don't call, it's because of how my screen is working. So just jump in there. Brenda, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I just wanted to thank Liz for that comment because I think it's incredibly important. And with all due respect, I think it's incredibly naive to say that we should expect transparency to hold the day, given the court of public opinion and the pressure that can be placed on some of these directors. And when that pressure from the court of public opinion falls on the shoulders of a governor, the governor needs to take the heat and not change the person in the role. And what we've seen as evidence is that it's easier to change the person in that role than it is to take the heat. And so I think Liz's question is absolutely right on. And the board would like I would like as a board member, some assurance that the governor is going to stand up and support the person that's hired and take whatever heat's going to come their way.
You know, Brenda, I think that you don't have to look very far back in the recent press regarding the pressure around issues relating to the Department of Transportation to see a direct quote from the governor about her philosophy on directors that are working to fix problems, are being transparent about their issues, and that is what we want to see in a director, and that no, she was not listening to calls for a change in the leadership of the department because that director had put themselves in the position of being problem solvers that were open to it. I will tell you that is the philosophy of this governor. We work closely as partners with directors, have an expectation of working through problems together and working with boards to help push the policies that will help make progress addressing the challenges the agency's facing. And that comes with the territory. And the fact that there's a lot of noise about it is not the defining factor
Hey, I'm
for
going to
this administration.
all right. I'm going to pose a question that Ben Doimling, kind of a grumpy question that he had, and since he's not here, so I'll repeat his question. He was making the point that with our state forest, one of the things we're supposed to do here is create a bunch of performance measures. And he says historically, a lot of those performance measures that have been created in the past weren't always measured or attained, and he's frustrated that now that we have even less authority to make sure that the performance measures we create will be meaningful and anybody will pay attention to them. And I think further he said, well, why should I bother? Why should I put a whole lot of work into those performance measures that are now likely to just be ignored? How would you answer Ben's question?
I watched Chandra and Ben have a good conversation about that this morning. We realized he wasn't going to be on this call, so we reached out and had a one-on-one this morning. But, Chandra, I thought you two worked through that pretty well.
Yeah, well, I think this gets towards the conversation that we were talking about earlier about the expectations of communication and coordination between our office and the board. And those are still very useful metrics. And frankly, I believe need to be updated at times as well, because they have been established in some cases a very long time ago and are maybe reflective of the current environment or what we're seeking. But as part of the executive work plan and the executive review process that we're going to be undertaking again as part of the 360 review, those are metrics that you all are in a really good position to assess. And that is really valuable information for us to be connecting on, both in terms of our interface from our office and the board, and then also as part of that official review process when we're assessing the performance of the forester. So I think they're still really very valuable. Having true KPIs that reflect what we're truly looking for in terms of performance of the agency and the director are important, and I think are still going to be really valuable to you and to us.
Chandra, on your 360 reviews for other agency heads, do you include all board members individually, or board or commission members individually in a 360?
Jeff, do you know that? Because I believe we do, or we have in circumstances.
It's been directed at the chair, but I think it's been at the discretion of the chair how that input comes into the review process. So I think some have been the chair, some have been the chair relaying a sense of the board or their observations, and some have even had a discussion of what kind of input to put into the process.
Yeah, and Jim, we can discuss too, again, as part of the governance conversations or whatever, what is the best mechanism and process for us to have that two-way street of communication? And is there something more official you would like to pass on to us at some intervals or something like that?
Okay.
You all have a ton of work, policy work that's in front of you, and this department needs your collective effort. And we are really, really appreciative of the fact that you volunteered to work on forest policy and set forest policy and partner with the department to provide everything that you do. And from our perspective, we don't want that to change, and we don't see any reason it should. And I would say that there's not a director in the Natural Resource Cabinet that does not worry about how to make sure they are working effectively with their board and commission members and as a group and individually. And that is, that's kind of the bedrock of the way Oregon's decided to address natural resource issues instead of having a DNR. It's that close connection to our boards and commissions, and that's not going to change here. And we can certainly all work hard to make sure that that's something that we are feeling comfortable about with the next director of the Department of Forestry.
Looks like we've used most of the hour that you two had available. So I would thank you very much for attempting to answer our grumpy and impolite questions. Reminding you again that you guys
Speak
asked
for
for.
yourself, Chair.
Chair, if I might too, just reiterating that again, I'll be the contact for our office on this recruitment, and I really am very excited to work with you all on this. And I think there really is some great potential here to get someone really well qualified in this position. And again, Liz, you very aptly noted all the different check-in points that we plan to have with the board, but it is I'm open for conversation with anyone who would like to have one on this topic. And again, the first kind of line of intersection here is if you all have anyone you would like to make sure that we forward on to this recruiter. So I really look forward to working with you all.
Great. Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
word on the street is that we looks like we'll probably have some real good talent coming in here possibly. So that's pretty exciting this time. So looking forward to it all. So thank you both, and we'll continue on with our conversation without you two. Thank you again.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks for having us. Anytime.
So basically, I think at this point, anything that we want to talk about relative to what our authorities are, and I think this would be useful to have Matt with us for this part of our meeting. And then also we can touch on the board policies manual. Matt, I'll start it off with because I'm just unclear sometimes of what it means in some of these areas around our authorities and regarding policy. So let me just throw out an example. The department exercises the good neighbor authority with with the Forest Service, I think primarily, generally been supported by the board. But let's just say that the board says we don't want the department involved in good neighbor authority. Not that that's likely to happen, but if we were, do we have authority to push and say to the department, don't do that work?
Well, Chair Kelly, I would need to go back to the Good Neighbor Authority statutes, but I believe that those are under a master agreement that's already signed by the governor.
I think
So the governor's office does have quite a bit of authority there that's completely separate from this issue.
Mhm.
But I think your broader point is what if the board sets a policy direction that is different from the governor's office? Is that essentially
Yeah.
yeah. No, and I don't know that there's going to be a very good legal answer that's going to be very satisfying for you, because a lot of this is going to have to be the policy and political discussion between the board and the governor's office to work through those issues.
Mhm.
We probably aren't going to give, at least in this public setting, I don't know that we're going to be able to provide much of a answer that's helpful.
Mhm. Okay. I see Heath and then Brenda with hands up.
Actually, if it's helpful, Chair Kelly, they'll always present, I think, in the order that the hands were raised on your screen. But for the record, Brenda's hand was up first.
Okay, Brenda, go ahead then.
Oh, well, thank you, Heath. I appreciate that. So Matt, I agree that there probably isn't a good legal answer. I don't think there's a good political answer either, because it's going to pit the board against the governor's office. And Jim just gave one example but there are going to be others. There clearly are going to be others. And so, yeah, I mean, it just further erodes the effectiveness and the, quite frankly, the interest in continuing forward in a board in board work. So, and I really worry about when governors and governor policy directors offices change personnel, and we have to deal with new people with new ideas, and without the continuity of having a board with authority. Kate, I would not want to be in your shoes as those changes occur, because I think it's going to be really frustrating for you.
Okay, Heath, thanks.
Well, I guess three comments. One, the first two will be in agreement with you, Brenda. That is to say, one, I think that it's true that the governor's office will have a great deal of influence over the work of the state forester and therefore the agency. I would say, though, that I think it's been proven the governor's office has had that degree of influence. That is to say, I think the last couple of state foresters were not fired by us and were dramatically resigned as a result of, I think, input from the governor's office. So I don't know that a great deal's changed there. What has changed is maybe our authority to do that. But I'm not aware in my career anyway of the Board of Forestry actually having acted on that authority. I'm not sure. Maybe the threat of that, but has been effective. But the second item I wanted to agree with you on is that I actually agree that the role of the board has been diminished over time. That is to say, the private forest accord, at least with aquatic rulemakings, sets us a process where the board's kind of going to get like pre-baked rules, right? It's going to go through like a lot of process and we're going to get it, and it's going to be kind of an up or down thing. And without the state forester kind of authority, that reduces a great deal of workload. And then three, once we have the new forest management plan in place, that's kind of sails on its own too, because the HCP will establish those conservation measures. The forest management plan is super high level, and we'll just kind of be watching how the component metrics are or not achieved relative to the performance measures. And, that'll be it's kind of a watch and see. I actually do think that the board will continue to play a meaningful role on like terrestrial rulemakings, the things that the PFA did not cover. There's still work out there for that. But I do actually agree with you. I think the Board of Forestry's authority and role and workload over time have reduced. And to that end, if I may, Chair Kelly, I just to put this on your radar, and this isn't like an affirmative request, but the statute provides that the board shall meet on the first Wednesday after the first Monday in January, March, June, and September. It's very specific about that. And I don't know if we observe that statute at all, really. But I would say, given the last several meetings of the board, I would say that we've budgeted quite a healthy amount of time for things that didn't require that much time. And I just mean to propose to you, it is actually quite possible, I think, that the board could meet less, if not less frequently, for a less amount of time. And so I'm not trying to accomplish any work there by that measure, but we're all very busy people. And to the degree that it is actually true that our workload is going to decline over time, then I think we should calibrate the frequency and duration of the meetings of the board.
Yeah, Heath, I appreciate that. And there's various things that have happened, which is why that happened. I think part of one of them was the HCP for state forests that just
Yes.
we had so much testimony for years on end, and so we made some of those moves, as well as the effort uh, to spend more time in small communities with our board meetings. And and so you're not wrong. It merits a look at that. But you're also, your point being made around our sort of authority being eroded. This is just one piece of it, and you're absolutely right. I think it is part of the effect of the private forest accord. I think it's also part of the effect of what is it, Measure 49, that we really have an authority supposed authority that we really don't use because we'll get sued for a taking.
Right.
And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think if you look at that over time, the power of this board is less than it once was, and that's not all about what just happened. It's just a piece of it now. Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty significant piece of it, though. Sorry, I should have not have spoken. I should have put my hand
All
up.
right.
Sorry, Kate.
Okay, go ahead.
Totally fine. Um, so I wanted to say too is, so from my seat, I've began some outreach to other directors that also are appointed by governor and have a commissioner board just to understand their mechanisms and processes there. Chandra and I have spoken a little bit too about setting up what does this look like between the two of us, as she'll be our point of contact. And then I think the other piece that I've been writing some notes here this morning is we have an October board retreat that I personally am looking forward to because I think it's going to set us up for this conversation around what are the priority policy work moving forward, and trying to bring that full circle for all of us, but also some of this work of what does our work together look like for the agency. And so I just wanted to let you know I've been trying to do a little bit of that work in the background, as well as making sure we have a clear transition plan for our next state forester and expectations to be shared from you with whoever that person is. So just background information of trying to run some trap lines behind the scenes here too.
We are required to provide financial oversight. It's interesting to think about. I've never felt that having a group of citizens reasonably expected to provide significant and valuable financial oversight for an agency with the complex financing of ODF was very realistic. But just mentioning that that's still out there in statute, that we are supposed to be doing that. Brenda?
So, Jim, do you see that as a lever?
I, I've become pretty circumspect about the relative power that we have
Yeah,
relative to the governor's office in any kind of
yeah,
disagreement, which is, I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
state.
I,
You don't, in our position, win those fights. So I don't
right.
know. It's certainly maybe lever's not the right word, but certainly being able to pay attention there and to um, have somebody who's just not looking at it just completely as a numbers, but identifying trends and all. I do
Yeah,
go back to that point of is the governor's office really going to be as fully aware of what's going on about the whole agency as they could and should be?
yeah.
And so if we're, we can provide an independent view that hopefully we can do in conjunction with the governor's office and have that be of value. We're not working for the department, and there's that's important.
Yeah, I just to quickly follow up on that, I understand what you're saying, and I tend to take a more cynical view than you do on just about everything, so I apologize for that. But but th that assumes that the governor's office will have the bandwidth to oversee a lot of these things that we're supposed to. They don't. That falls back to us. So then we have the responsibility to do what you just described, and we have no authority to make anything happen unless we trust the governor's office to follow through on things that we recommend. And so I just come back to being really disillusioned by what we're faced with here for the next, what do we have now, Jim? A year and 3 months, something like that, and longer for the rest of you. Yeah,
Not for me. I think I got a year left. So
yeah, okay. Sorry, I'll be quiet. I'm just a downer right now.
that's that's what we're doing here, Brenda. It's okay. This is the intention here to get through all of that. But I mean, again, I wish we had that authority. I think it would make us more effective, but again, there's work that we can do with the soft power that we have, and as well as so we'll see. Anybody else got anything that they want to add in here? Liz, go ahead, and otherwise we'll wrap up here pretty quick, but you go ahead.
I just for a clarity piece, I did not understand where we landed on the performance measures for the question that was asked of I didn't know what was the final
Well,
there.
my understanding, it doesn't change anything technically. We're still responsible to, create performance measures. I think Ben's point was he was just being cynical about
Okay.
why should I do this work when I don't know that anybody's going to pay attention and really try to those measures. And fair point, but I don't think there's nothing about this that changes our role there specifically. Brenda?
Um, yeah, Jim, I don't know if it's appropriate, and so if it's not, you'll slap my hand, I'm sure, but I would be really curious to hear from each of the board members on the call today what their takeaway is from today. To the degree that you're comfortable doing it. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
Alexei, you've been pretty quiet, and Joe's been pretty quiet, and
Good idea. I agree.
Yeah, I can speak up. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that we should, as a board, be talking about this recruitment process and folks that are participating in the different stages. If we could somehow have, I don't know if it's like report backs or some sort of communication that we can, I don't know if we're delivering a recommendation to the governor, or I don't know. Jeff seemed like he was really supportive of us, like all coming together and sharing our thoughts on this process and on potential candidates. And I think that we should take that serious and try to do that work in the meantime while these practice. So yeah, I don't know how we are gonna implement that, but I think that we really should try to provide as much feedback and recommendation to the governor's office as possible. And it sounds like Chandra wants to have more checkpoints with the board, and I don't know if that's something just like moving forward, and if that's something at the board retreat that we really want to, like, I don't know if we want to propose some sort of process to be engaging with the governor's office more and share it with them, but I think the board retreat could be an opportunity to talk through that more of how the board wants to interact more with the governor's office. That's all.
Yeah, I thought you guys asked great questions. A lot of things are going through my mind. That's why mostly I was quiet. The thing that I reflect on through this interview, and Jim points out that he believes we have some great candidates that are likely going to throw their hat into the ring, and I absolutely hope that Jim is correct in that. We need a very, very special individual to serve in this role. And it does look at the recruiting process. It's going to be a very public process yet again. And so the challenges we ran into a pool of candidates, I wonder how that will play out. I guess I would just say, will we end up with a strong pool of candidates through this process? I hope we do. I'm suspicious because I've gone through this process once before. And I know some of us on this call have gone through it once before, and anyway, I don't beat that dead horse, But I hope that we do have a strong pool of candidates, and I hope that the relationship with the state forester, I guess, respects the board and our relationship to the governor's office. We still have some effectiveness to move the dial with the governor's office and the next state forester. But absolutely, this is gonna absolutely change. Losing the ability to hire, ultimately, the 7 people on this board having the ability to hire that person diminishes our responsibility. And I think Heath made a great point. Kind of. I guess I hadn't thought of it that way, Heath. Like, I almost feel like we're like landing the ship. Like as a bit. Brenda and Jim and I have been on this board for 8 years, and it's just we're just kind of landing the ship. And personally, it is harder for me to be engaged in this, quite frankly. I'll be honest. I mean, Brenda said it more out publicly, but I feel very much the same thing. I'm a busy guy, I got a lot going on, and what if what we're doing isn't going to affect change or we have influence, then you begin to question what am I doing with my time here? So all I can do is hope and trust, and that I'm pretty optimistic. That's just my nature. I don't like to be the other way. So I'm going to do whatever I can to contribute how I can, and hope that the governor's office and we end up with a great candidate, and we still have in this board, as Jim and Brendan and I will soon be leaving it, we'll still have influence on the governor's office and still can play that role. But I guess that's not going to be up to me, quite frankly. So I know I said I'll stop.
Heath, anything?
Well, a couple things. One, Joe, you talked about a public process there. I'm of the impression, it may be mistaken, but I'm of the impression that those panels, those 3 rounds, will all be non-public meetings.
Okay, maybe I wasn't clear on that. I hope they are. I hope that is.
I think it'll be the hope anyway, and there's going to be a bunch of people, and so things leak, I guess, and that's probably the point. But the hope is that it should be a pretty quiet process, and that quality candidates should take some comfort in that. That is to say, they'll be able to get through that process, and then we'll publish, decisions at the end, I guess. And so I think that's pretty good news. In terms of like the board and the board's role, you know, I I kind of said my piece earlier. I remember watching the riparian rulemaking prior to the PFA as following the ripstream studies, and it kind of came to the end, and there was like a bunch of like super awkward jockeying by the board members on that rulemaking about kind of buffer widths and how it was going to work out, and it was kind of wild, and it kind of surprised me, honestly, being in the middle of that and negotiating aggressively for a particular outcome. It was kind of wild to me that it even worked that way, right? It was like it was definitely a political compromise, and there's, I suppose, some utility to that. But in this kind of new era where we've got an adaptive management process that kind of formalizes those proposals to the board, and in an era where management of state forests is going to move under the HCP and kind of a directed process through the State Forest Division. I don't know that that's all bad. My hope genuinely is that it actually does kind of cool things down at the Board of Forestry some. I mean, it's been so hot for so many years with such major, major things at stake that, to be honest, it's made business investments in Oregon difficult because you don't know where things are going to go, and it's all contingent on this wild like politics among these 7 board members, and you're going, wow, how's this going to work out? And then people like driving log trucks to Salem for a Board of Forestry meeting. I don't know. I feel like some of this has diminished the role of the Board of Forestry, and I, I may regret it. And frankly, I think there's people in the industry who disagree with me on this count. But I kind of think it's probably for the good. I think that the idea that this was going to be a hot and contentious and in the newspaper body is not healthy and was not working well. So that's my opinion.
Anybody else? I think it's I'll just admit, that what Brenda was describing and what Joe was describing, just I also struggle with at this point, looking at a year left of just how do I keep my energy up? How do I not mentally check out? Last year with all of the stuff that went on was really tough. At all levels, including at a personal level. And but I look at the changes that are going to, we're going to have a new board chair. We're going to have several new board members, pretty much all pretty much at once. I guess we just need to the three of us put our big boy or big girl pants on uh, and do the work because it's going to be really important as all of this transition happens, that we're not checking out early. Anyhow, that would be my pep talk to ourselves. All right, I'm not hearing anything else. And with that, thank you all for meeting today, and we are adjourned.
Thank you. See y'all soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks.